Have you ever had that moment where your entire reality shatters in an instant, where a single object, something as innocent as a tube of lipstick, becomes the first domino in a cascade that brings your whole life crashing down? Hi there. I'm Rachel, 32, a forensic accountant living in Seattle. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but sometimes the universe has other plans. I found a lipstick in his car, and my heart dropped instantly. It was a bright red shade I'd never wear, too bold for my neutral palette. I was just looking for the phone charger David had promised to bring back after borrowing it from my office. Instead, I found something that made my stomach turn into a block of ice. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 1. The wedding was 6 months away, and we'd already put deposits down on everything. The venue, the caterer. My dress was hanging in my sister's closet because David shouldn't see it before the big day. When I confronted him, ready for the worst, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "It's not what you think. It belongs to my sister. She borrowed my car yesterday." His voice was steady. His eyes didn't waver. He even called Melissa right there on speakerphone. "Hey Mel, did you leave your lipstick in my car yesterday?" David asked casually. "Oh shoot, is it a red one?" "Yeah, that's mine. I was running late for my date with Greg and did my makeup in your car." "Sorry about that." Relief washed over me. I felt foolish for doubting him. David pulled me into a hug and whispered, "See, nothing to worry about." I apologized for jumping to conclusions. He was understanding, even sweet about it. Made us dinner that night, my favorite pasta dish with the expensive wine we'd been saving. "To trust," he toasted, clinking his glass against mine. I should have known better. As a forensic accountant, my entire career is built on finding discrepancies, following paper trails, noticing when things don't add up. But love makes fools of the most analytical minds. The real truth shocked me even more. A week later, I discovered hidden receipts for expensive jewelry while doing laundry. The receipts were stuffed in his jeans pocket, dating back 3 months. A diamond bracelet, a pair of sapphire earrings, a necklace worth more than our monthly mortgage payment. None of it was ever given to me. I stared at those pieces of paper for what felt like hours. My mind, usually so quick with numbers and patterns, refused to process what was right in front of me. There had to be an explanation. Maybe they were for my upcoming birthday, but that was months away. Christmas, even further. I carefully folded the receipts and put them back exactly where I found them. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I started investigating my fiancé. As a forensic accountant, I know how to follow money. It's what I do for a living. I find where funds are hidden, how they're moved, what story they tell when people think no one is looking. My clients are usually corporations suspecting embezzlement or wealthy individuals going through divorce. Never did I imagine using these skills on the man I was supposed to spend my life with. I started small, checking our joint account for unusual withdrawals. There were several, always just under $500. The amount we'd agreed would trigger a conversation before spending. Always on Fridays, always from ATMs near his office. Then I moved on to his credit card statements. He'd always insisted on keeping separate cards to maintain our independence. Now I understood why. The statements told a story of dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together, hotel charges in the city where we lived, more jewelry purchases than the receipts I'd found, all while we were supposedly saving for our wedding and the down payment on a house. "Just a few more months of being frugal," he'd say whenever I suggested a weekend getaway or a nice dinner. "It'll all be worth it when we have our dream home." Meanwhile, he was spending thousands on someone else. The sister excuse kept nagging at me. It had been so perfect, so rehearsed. I called Melissa directly one afternoon while David was at work. "Hey, quick question. That red lipstick you left in David's car? What brand was it? I really liked the color." A pause. I think it was Maybelline? Or maybe Revlon? I don't really remember. The lipstick I'd found was Chanel, $45 worth of evidence. Also, when did you borrow his car again? I'm trying to piece together when he mentioned it to me. Another pause. Longer this time. Last Tuesday? No, Wednesday. I had that thing with Greg. It had been a Monday when I found it. David had claimed she borrowed it yesterday, Sunday. When I'd suggested we go to her place for Sunday dinner, he'd said she was out of town visiting friends. The lies were piling up, contradicting each other like mismatched puzzle pieces forced together. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking. I needed more evidence. Something concrete. Something undeniable. So I did the unthinkable. I installed tracking software on his phone while he was in the shower. Nothing that would access his personal data. I wasn't looking to read his messages or emails, just location tracking. I told myself it was the last resort before a confrontation that could end everything. For 2 weeks, I watched the blue dot of his location move across my screen. Most days, it matched what he told me. Work, gym, drinks with colleagues. But every Friday, the pattern changed. He'd leave work early, claiming to meet his college friend Marcus for their weekly squash game. The blue dot never went to the athletic club. Instead, it would stop at a florist, then move to an address in Queen Anne, one of Seattle's nicer neighborhoods. It would stay there for approximately 3 hours before returning home. On the third Friday, I drove to Queen Anne and parked across from the address. It was an upscale apartment building with a doorman. At exactly 6:15 p.m., David's car pulled up. He emerged with a bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers that he never remembered, to buy me. He smoothed his hair, straightened his tie, and walked confidently into the building like he'd done it 100 times before. I sat there, numb, watching the windows of the building light up as the evening darkened around me. Which one was she in? What did she look like? Did she know about me? About the wedding we were planning? At 9:20 p.m., he emerged again. His tie was loosened, hair slightly mussed. He checked his watch, then his phone, probably texting me the same lie he always did. Game went long, grabbing a beer with Marcus. Be home by 10. I followed him to a jewelry store that I knew closed at 9 p.m. for normal customers. He knocked, and someone let him in. 20 minutes later, he came out with a small bag. Something inside me broke and reformed in that moment, the pain crystallizing into something harder, colder. I drove home before him and was asleep when he arrived. He slipped into bed, smelling of unfamiliar perfume poorly masked by the mintiness of the gum he'd obviously chewed on the drive home. "You awake?" he whispered. I kept my breathing steady, my back to him. He placed something in his nightstand drawer and turned off the light. The next morning, while he was out for his Saturday run, I opened the drawer. Inside was a small velvet box containing diamond earrings that matched the description on one of the receipts I'd found. "Early birthday present," read the gift tag. My birthday was 4 months away. I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. First, I needed to understand the full scope of his deception. And then, only then, would I decide what to do with the man who thought he could fool a woman who uncovers financial fraud for a living. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my career, it's that money always leaves a trail, and so do liars. That night, I smiled at him over dinner and asked innocently about his game with Marcus. He launched into an elaborate story about winning by 2 points in the final set. I nodded and asked questions in all the right places while something cold and calculating took root in my chest. The woman I was 2 weeks ago might have thrown the evidence in his face, demanded answers through tears and anger. But that woman was gone. In her place was someone quieter, more patient. Someone who understood that the best way to handle a liar isn't to confront them with fragments of the truth, but to silently gather every piece until the picture is so complete that denial becomes impossible. "You seem different," David said, studying my face across the table. "Everything okay?" I smiled, raised my glass in a toast. "To truth," I said, echoing his words from a week before. "It always finds a way out, doesn't it?" He clinked his glass against mine, not recognizing the promise in my words. "Always," he agreed, taking a sip of his wine. He had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. While David slept soundly beside me, I slipped out of bed and made a cup of coffee, staring out the kitchen window as Seattle's perpetual drizzle painted everything in shades of gray. Fitting, considering the colorful life I thought I had was revealing itself to be nothing but smoke and mirrors. I needed a plan. As a forensic accountant, I approach every case methodically. Evidence gathering, documentation, analysis. Why should this be any different? First, I needed to know who she was. The Queen Anne apartment was my starting point. I called in sick to work on Monday, something I never do, and parked near the building early in the morning. I brought coffee, snacks, and a book I had no intention of reading. At 8:15, my patience was rewarded. A woman exited the building, umbrella unfurled against the rain, tall, elegant, with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly how attractive you are. She couldn't have been more different from me, where I'm 5'4", With practical brown hair always pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, she was willowy with cascading blonde waves. While I dressed for comfort in jeans and sweaters, she wore a tailored dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. I snapped a few discreet photos with my phone, then followed her to a nearby cafe. She ordered something complicated, I could tell by the barista's expression, then took a seat by the window. A few minutes later, she was joined by another woman. They talked animatedly, laughing over their coffees. I sat several tables away, angling my phone as if checking emails while actually recording snippets of their conversation. The cafe noise made it difficult, but I caught her name, Vanessa. "So, how's it going with the investor?" her friend asked. Vanessa's smile was a study in satisfaction. Better than expected. "He's completely smitten. The proposal is moving forward, and if everything goes according to plan, I'll be set for life." "You're terrible," her friend laughed, not sounding disapproving at all. "I'm smart," Vanessa corrected. "Men like him are a dime a dozen. Successful, bored with their predictable lives, desperate to feel young and exciting again. I'm just giving him what he wants while making sure I get what I need." "And what about when his fiancé finds out?" My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. Vanessa shrugged, dismissing me, the unnamed fiancé, with a gesture. "She's some kind of accountant. All numbers, no passion. He says she's more interested in their investment portfolio than in him. Trust me, she has no idea. And by the time she figures it out, I'll be well taken care of." I wanted to stand up, march over, and throw my coffee in her perfectly made-up face. I wanted to tell her that this numbers person was sitting 3 tables away, recording every word. But that would have accomplished nothing. Instead, I waited until they left, then followed Vanessa to a boutique real estate office. The sign on the door read, "Elite Properties, where luxury finds you." Through the window, I watched her greet colleagues, settle at a desk, and begin working. A real estate agent. It made perfect sense. Back in my car, I Googled the agency and quickly found her profile. Vanessa Mitchell, luxury property specialist. 5 years with the company, specializing in finding dream homes for discerning clients. I wondered if she specialized in finding dream men for herself too. That evening when David came home, I greeted him with a kiss and dinner on the table. He seemed surprised. I'm not usually the cooking type, but pleased. "What's the occasion?" he asked, loosening his tie. "No occasion. Just thought we should talk about the house search. I've been thinking we should get more serious about it." His eyes lit up. This had been his crusade for months, finding the perfect house before the wedding. I'd been the hesitant one, always wanting to save more first. "Really? That's great, babe. I actually met with a realtor last week. She comes highly recommended for our price range." I took a slow sip of water. "Oh, what's her name? Maybe I should meet her." Vanessa Mitchell. She's shown me a few properties already. Nothing perfect yet, but she really understands what we're looking for." I nodded, maintaining my poker face while rage boiled beneath the surface. So this was his story. Vanessa wasn't just some random affair. She was skillfully inserting herself into our life, positioning herself to profit from both our relationship and its inevitable demise. "I'd love to meet her," I said, serving him another portion of lasagna. "Maybe we could all get together this Friday." He nearly choked. "Friday's not good. She's booked solid. But maybe next week?" "Sure, next week works too." Over the next few days, I dug deeper. I pulled David's credit reports, documenting every suspicious charge. I researched Vanessa Mitchell, learning that she had a pattern of selling properties to newly divorced men. Men who, I strongly suspected, had been her clients while still married. The picture emerging was both clear and nauseating. David wasn't just having an affair. He was being expertly manipulated by someone who'd done this before. The jewelry, the Friday meetings, the sudden push for house hunting, it was all part of a well-practiced scheme. But what hurt most wasn't his betrayal. It was the realization that I'd been casually dismissed as all numbers, no passion. Was that really how David saw me? After 4 years together, was I just the practical choice, the safe option? The woman who could manage his finances but not excite his heart. On Thursday night, I lay awake beside him, studying his sleeping face. Once, I'd found comfort in those features. Now, I searched for signs of the stranger he'd become. Or perhaps he'd always been this person, and I'd been too in love to notice. Friday arrived, his usual day with her. I tracked his phone as he left work early, watched as the blue dot stopped at the florist. Roses this time, not lilies, then moved to her apartment building. This week, however, I had a different plan. At precisely 8:30 p.m., I called him. "David, there's been an accident. I'm at the hospital." The panic in his voice seemed genuine. "What? What happened?" "Are you okay?" "Car accident on Aurora. Nothing too serious, but they want to keep me overnight for observation. Possible concussion. Could you come? I'm scared." "Of course, baby. I'm with Marcus, but I'll leave right now." "Which hospital?" "Northwest, room 302. I ended the call and waited, watching his location. The blue dot hesitated at Vanessa's apartment for another 7 minutes, long enough for explanations, hasty dressing, perhaps promises for tomorrow, before finally moving toward Northwest Hospital. Meanwhile, I sat in our living room, surrounded by printouts of credit card statements, receipts, photos, and property listings. Everything meticulously organized, as only a forensic accountant could manage. I'd even calculated the exact amount he'd spent on Vanessa over the past 3 months. $17,142.37. That's how much our relationship was worth to him. When his car pulled into the driveway 35 minutes later, I turned on the living room lights, illuminating my evidence wall like a museum exhibition dedicated to his betrayal. The front door opened. "Rachel, why aren't you at the hospital? What's going on?" He stopped dead in the entryway, taking in the scene before him. His face cycled through confusion, shock, and finally, the dawning horror of recognition. "What is all this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "This," I said calmly, "is the truth you thought I'd never find." "I can explain." "Explain what, David?" "The lipstick that wasn't Melissa's. The jewelry that wasn't for me. The squash games with Marcus that were actually afternoons with Vanessa. Or maybe you'd like to explain how I'm art all numbers, no passion." The color drained from his face. "You followed me? I didn't need to follow you. Your lies left a trail a child could follow. But yes, I did see you enter her building with lilies last week. And roses tonight." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. Now it just looked like the nervous tick of a man caught in his own web. "It's not what you think," he began, then stopped, realizing how ridiculous that sounded given the evidence literally wallpapering our living room. "Let me guess," I said. "She means nothing to you. It was a mistake. You'll end it immediately." He sank onto the couch, suddenly looking smaller. "I never meant to hurt you. And yet, here we are." For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of 4 years together and 6 months of lies hanging between us. "How long have you known?" he finally asked. "Long enough to understand this isn't a one-time mistake. It's a calculated deception." I picked up a spreadsheet I'd prepared. "You've spent nearly $18,000 on her in 3 months, David. That's money we were supposed to be saving for our future." He flinched at the precise figure. "It got out of hand. I met her when I was looking at properties. Just to surprise you, initially. She was so different, exciting. It was just supposed to be a fling. And now that she's showing you houses for us, was that part of the fling too?" His expression told me everything. There was a larger plan at work, one I hadn't fully uncovered yet. "She found a perfect property," he said quietly. "We were going to buy it after the wedding. It's an incredible investment opportunity." "We? Or you and her?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "You were planning to leave me," I realized aloud, the final piece clicking into place. "After the wedding, after combining our finances," my analytical mind raced ahead, assembling the scenario: marriage, joint accounts, a house purchase with my savings contributing significantly to the down payment, then a sudden discovery of irreconcilable differences, a divorce where the property would need to be sold, with Vanessa as the listing agent, naturally, and David mysteriously ending up with the lion's share while I got the emotional devastation. It was elegant, in a twisted way, and it would have worked on someone less attuned to financial machinations. "I think you should leave," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Rachel, please. We can work through this. I'll end it with her. I swear. It was a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, David." This was a carefully orchestrated betrayal involving my sister, my finances, and my future. There's nothing to work through. He tried another angle. "What about the wedding? The deposits? Your dress?" I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. Are you seriously worried about deposits right now, after what you've done? I just mean, it's complicated. Untangling everything. I'm a forensic accountant. Untangling complicated financial situations is literally my job. He stood then, anger finally breaking through his facade of remorse. You know, this is exactly why this happened. You're so cold, so analytical. Everything's a balance sheet to you. And what does that make you? The poor, misunderstood man who had to seek passion elsewhere? Save it for someone who hasn't seen your credit card statements? His face darkened. You had no right to go through my private information. And you had no right to pledge your life to me while building a separate one with her. We stared at each other, 4 years of love curdling into something bitter and unrecognizable. I'll get some things and go to Marcus's, he finally said. The real Marcus, or is that another lie? He didn't answer, just disappeared into our bedroom and emerged 10 minutes later with a hastily packed bag. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I did love you. Not enough to be faithful, not enough to be honest. So really, what was it worth? After he left, I sat alone in the wreckage of what I'd thought was my future. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt strangely empty, as if the woman who had loved David had already grieved and departed, leaving behind only the accountant who could assess damages with clear eyes. I gathered my evidence into a folder and tucked it away. Then I opened my laptop and began making lists. People to call about canceling the wedding, accounts to separate, deposits to try to reclaim. It was past midnight when my phone buzzed with a text from David. We need to talk. This isn't over. I stared at the message, then typed my response. Actually, it is. And David? The earrings in your nightstand. They're cubic zirconia, not diamonds. She's scamming you too. I turned off my phone, made myself a cup of tea, and began planning what would come next. Because while David thought he was the one with the sophisticated scheme, he had no idea who he was dealing with. The game wasn't over, it was just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did what I do best. I followed the money. By morning, I had mapped out every financial connection between David and me. Joint checking account, shared savings for the wedding and house down payment, the rental agreement with both our names, credit cards we'd used for joint expenses, even though the accounts were separate. What I found confirmed what I already knew. David had been systematically draining our shared resources while maintaining a facade of responsible saving. The house fund we'd been building had $22,000 less than it should have based on our agreed monthly contributions. When my phone finally died from his incessant calls and messages, I felt a strange relief in the silence. I plugged it in but didn't turn it back on. Instead, I showered, dressed in my most professional outfit, and drove to my office. It was Saturday, but I knew my boss would be there. Martin never stopped working, which is why our firm had the reputation it did. Rachel. He looked up in surprise when I knocked on his open door. Everything okay? You never miss work. I need your advice, I said, sitting across from him. And possibly a different kind of job. I explained the situation, the clinical version, without tears or accusations. Just facts and figures. The language Martin best understood. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. So you want to investigate your own fiancé and his girlfriend. Ex-fiancé, I corrected. And yes, I believe they're involved in a pattern of financial manipulation that goes beyond my situation. If my suspicions are correct, this isn't the first time they've done this. Martin's expression softened, as much as it ever did. This isn't just about the money, is it? You want justice. I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. The betrayal hurt. But what truly fueled me was indignation. The idea that they thought they could outsmart me, use me, and discard me once they'd extracted what they wanted. I want the truth, I said. And I want to make sure they can't do this to anyone else. Martin nodded slowly. We typically don't take on personal cases, but he tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking, I could classify this as professional development, a case study in romantic fraud schemes. Take 2 weeks. Use whatever resources you need. But Rachel, his eyes met mine. Be careful. People get dangerous when their schemes start unraveling. I know how to protect myself. Financially, sure, but emotionally, physically, these aren't corporations you're dealing with. These are people who've already shown they're comfortable with deception. He was right, of course. This wasn't like my usual cases, where the evidence was presented in court, and I never had to confront the perpetrators directly. I'll be careful, I promised. And Martin? Thank you. Back at my apartment, I finally turned on my phone. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, 5 voicemails, all from David, each more desperate than the last. The final voicemail caught my attention. Rachel, please. I don't know what you think you know about Vanessa, but you're wrong. She's not what you think. Call me back. This is important. Interesting. So he was concerned about my comment regarding the fake diamonds. Perhaps there was more to Vanessa than I'd uncovered. I spent the rest of the weekend building my case. Monday morning, I walked into Elite Properties with a confident smile and a fabricated interest in luxury real estate. I have an appointment with Vanessa Mitchell, I told the receptionist. 5 minutes later, Vanessa herself emerged from her office, hand extended in professional greeting. Up close, she was even more striking. Flawless makeup, subtle perfume, a smile that conveyed both warmth and authority. Mrs. Parker, I'm Vanessa Mitchell. Please, come in. She didn't recognize me. Why would she? To her, I was just a name on an appointment book, another potential commission. She had no idea she'd been describing me to my own fiancé as a passionless accountant. I'm interested in investment properties, I explained, once we were seated in her tastefully appointed office. Specifically, pre-construction opportunities with strong appreciation potential. Her eyes lit up at the prospect of a serious buyer. You've come to the right place. I specialize in exactly those kinds of opportunities. Are you familiar with the Harbor Heights development? I nodded. That's actually what brought me to you. I understand you've been working with some early investors on that project. A friend of mine, David Wilson, mentioned your name. The change in her expression was subtle but unmistakable. A momentary widening of the eyes, quickly controlled. David? Yes, he's a client. Are you two friends? We have mutual interests, I said, watching her carefully. He speaks very highly of your expertise. She relaxed slightly, misinterpreting my pause. That's wonderful to hear. David has excellent taste in properties. And in professionals? He certainly seems to think so. In fact, he's been making some significant investments recently. Jewelry, weekend getaways, real estate consultations. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes had gone cold. I'm not sure I understand what you're implying, Mrs. Parker. I think you do, Mr. Mitchell. I reached into my briefcase and placed a folder on her desk. Or should I call you Vanessa Reynolds? Or maybe Vanessa Chambers? You seem to have used several names in your career. The color drained from her perfect complexion. Who are you? I'm Rachel Parker, David's fiancée, the woman you dismissed as all numbers, no passion. And as it happens, those numbers are about to become a very big problem for you. She stood abruptly. And I think you should leave. I will. But first, let me tell you what I know. I opened the folder and began laying out documents. 3 failed marriages in 8 years, each ending shortly after substantial property investments with you as the agent. Financial fraud charges in 2018 that were mysteriously dropped. And most recently, a pattern of targeting engaged or newly married men with significant savings. Her composure cracked. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. I'm a forensic accountant, Vanessa. Following money trails is what I do. And yours leads directly to at least 4 cases of fraudulent investment schemes involving romantic manipulation. This is harassment. I'll call security. Go ahead. I'm sure they'd be interested in the recordings I have of you discussing how you plan to access my savings through David, or perhaps the police would find them more relevant to their ongoing investigation. There was no police investigation, yet, but she didn't need to know that. Vanessa sank back into her chair. What do you want? Money? I can write you a check right now. I laughed. I don't want your money. I want you to understand what happens next. I slid a document across the desk. This is a cease and desist letter. You will end all contact with David Wilson immediately. You will return any gifts or funds he has given you. You will withdraw from the Harbor Heights investment scheme you've been promoting, which, incidentally, I've discovered is significantly misrepresenting its projected returns. You can't dictate who I see or what properties I sell. No, but the Real Estate Commission can revoke your license when they receive my evidence of your pattern of ethical violations. And the IRS might have questions about certain unreported income streams I've identified. Her face had gone from pale to ashen. You're bluffing. Try me. I stood, gathering my documents except for the cease and desist letter. You have 48 hours to comply. After that, The information goes to the authorities. And Vanessa, the diamonds you've been accepting, get them appraised. David's not the only one being scammed in this scenario. As I turned to leave, she called after me. He doesn't love you, you know. He never did. You're just a convenience to him, a stable foundation while he builds his real life. I paused at the door. That may be true, but at least I know who I am. Can you say the same? Back in my car, my hands finally began to shake. The confrontation had required every ounce of my composure, but it had been worth it to see the look on her face. Still, Vanessa's parting words echoed uncomfortably. Was she right? Had I just been David's security blanket all along? I pushed the thought aside and drove to my next destination, David's office. Unlike with Vanessa, I didn't bother with an appointment. I walked straight past the receptionist, ignoring her protests, and pushed open the door to his corner office. He looked up from his computer, shock registering on his face. Rachel, what are you? We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. About Vanessa, Harbor Heights, and the money you've been stealing from our joint accounts. He paled. I haven't stolen anything. That money was for our future? For the house we were going to buy together? Save it, David. I've seen the transfer records. $22,000 moved from our savings to your personal account, then distributed to various investments and, of course, gifts for your girlfriend. It's not that simple, he protested. The Harbor Heights opportunity is real. I was going to surprise you with what? A property that doesn't exist yet? In a development that's massively over-leveraged and likely to fail before completion? I shook my head. I've done my research, David. The projected returns are fabricated. The developer has a history of abandoning projects mid-construction, and your girlfriend has been collecting commissions on both ends while feeding you false information. He stared at me, the realization slowly dawning that he wasn't just caught in an affair. He was caught in a financial trap. How do you know all this? Because it's my job to know. To see patterns, follow money, identify fraud. I just never thought I'd be using those skills on my own fiancé. David slumped in his chair. I've made a terrible mistake, haven't I? Several, actually, but you have a chance to minimize the damage. I placed a folder on his desk. These are the documents you'll need to file fraud charges against Vanessa and the Harbor Heights developers. I've already drafted the statements based on the evidence I've gathered. He looked confused. You want me to help you take them down? I want you to do the right thing, for once. And us? Is there any chance? There is no us, David. That ended the moment you decided our relationship was a convenient cover for your real life. But I'm giving you an opportunity to salvage something from this mess. Your reputation, your financial future, maybe even your conscience, if you still have one. He picked up the folder, leafing through the meticulously prepared documents. You did all this in 2 days? Like I said, it's my job. As I turned to leave, he called after me, just as Vanessa had. I did love you, Rachel. In my way. I paused, hand on the doorknob. Your way wasn't enough, and it certainly wasn't worth what it cost me. The next week passed in a blur of activity. David, facing the reality of his financial predicament, agreed to cooperate. He filed the fraud complaints, returned what remained of the money he'd withdrawn from our joint accounts, and signed papers relinquishing any claim to our wedding deposits. Vanessa, meanwhile, seemed to have underestimated my resolve. When the 48-hour deadline passed without her compliance, I submitted my evidence to the Real Estate Commission, the Better Business Bureau, and yes, the IRS. Within days, Elite Properties placed her on her administrative leave pending investigation. The Harbor Heights development suddenly announced restructuring of investor opportunities, which anyone in real estate would recognize as code for "we're in trouble." I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. I'd won the battle, exposed the fraud, protected potential future victims, but I'd lost the future I'd planned, the man I thought I knew, the life I'd been building. One evening, as I sat alone in what had been our apartment, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Is this Rachel Parker?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Jennifer Lewis. You don't know me, but I think we have something in common. Or someone. David Wilson." My heart skipped. What about him? I was engaged to him 2 years ago. Before you. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, yet somehow it did. I see. And let me guess, he met a real estate agent who showed him an amazing investment property. Her bitter laugh confirmed it. "At Vanessa Mitchell." "Yes, I lost nearly $30,000 before I realized what was happening. By then, David had already moved on. To you, I'm guessing. How did you find me? I've been following the Harbor Heights investigation in the news. Your name came up as the whistleblower. I recognized David's name in the complaint filings. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. I closed my eyes, absorbing this new information. Were there others before you? At least one that I know of. Her name was Melissa. Apparently, she lost everything: savings, house, retirement fund. Last I heard, she'd moved back in with her parents. Melissa? The same name as David's sister, the sister who had supposedly left her lipstick in his car, the sister who had confirmed his story when he called her on speakerphone. Jennifer, this sister he mentioned. Melissa. Did you ever meet her? Sister? David was an only child. The final piece clicked into place. The woman on the phone that day hadn't been his sister at all. It had been his previous victim, somehow still involved in his schemes, perhaps hoping to recoup some of her losses by helping him target new women. I think, I said slowly, that we should meet. There's more to this story than either of us knows. I was hoping you'd say that. I've started a support group, actually. There are 5 of us now, all of David's exes. All victims of the same scam, with variations in the details. 5 women. 5 lives disrupted. 5 sets of dreams shattered by the same man and his accomplice. When and where? I asked, already reaching for my notebook. As I wrote down the details of the meeting, something shifted inside me. The hollow feeling was replaced by a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore, or even about David and Vanessa. This was about a pattern of predation that had affected multiple women, and would continue unless someone stopped it. That night, I called Martin. Remember when you said this could be a case study in romantic fraud schemes? I began without preamble. I'm listening, he replied, instantly alert despite the late hour. It's bigger than I thought. Multiple victims over several years, a consistent methodology with slight variations to avoid detection, and it crosses state lines, which makes it federal. Martin was silent for a moment. You're talking about a full-scale investigation, beyond what one person can handle. I know. That's why I'm calling. I need resources, connections, possibly legal counsel for the victims. You realize this could become your full-time focus for months, possibly years? I thought about the women I was meeting tomorrow, about Melissa, who had lost everything, about the hollow feeling in my chest that was slowly being replaced by determination. I'm counting on it, I said. When I hung up, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I titled it Project Phoenix, because from the ashes of these ruined relationships, something new would rise, something powerful, something that would ensure David Wilson and Vanessa Mitchell never harmed another woman again. The next morning, before meeting Jennifer and the others, I stopped by the jeweler where David had purchased those fake diamond earrings. I showed my forensic accounting credentials and asked to speak with the manager about a potential fraud investigation. These receipts, I explained, showing copies of what I'd found in David's pocket, are for purchases made in the last 3 months. I need to verify their authenticity. The manager, a distinguished older gentleman, examined them carefully. These are our receipts, certainly, but there's something odd about them. What do you mean? He pointed to the item descriptions. These codes indicate genuine diamond pieces, but we haven't sold anything with these specific codes in over a year. They were discontinued due to sourcing issues. So the receipts are fake? No, the receipts are real, but they've been altered. The item codes have been changed. My pulse quickened. Can you tell what was actually purchased? He typed something into his computer. According to our records, these transactions were for our cubic zirconia collection. Same designs, but significantly lower price points. So I'd been right about the fake diamonds, but there was more to the story. Who made these purchases? He hesitated. I'm not sure I should... This is part of an active fraud investigation, I said, not specifying which agency I represented. Sometimes ambiguity was more effective than lies. He relented. The purchases were made by a woman, Vanessa Mitchell. She's a regular customer. So Vanessa had been buying the jewelry herself, cheap imitations of expensive pieces, and providing David with altered receipts to show me if I ever got suspicious. Meanwhile, David had been withdrawing large sums of money, ostensibly for these lavish gifts, but actually for... what? I thanked the manager and left, my mind racing with new questions. What if David wasn't just Vanessa's victim-turned-accomplice? What if he was the mastermind, and she was just one part of his operation? As I drove to meet Jennifer and the other women, I realized I was no longer investigating a simple case of infidelity and financial deception. I was unraveling a sophisticated fraud ring that had potentially stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from unsuspecting women, and they had no idea what was coming for them. The coffee shop was quiet when I arrived, tucked away in a neighborhood far from downtown. Jennifer had chosen well, neutral territory, private enough for difficult conversations, but public enough to feel safe meeting strangers. I recognized her immediately, though we'd never met. There was something in her eyes, a wariness, a wounded wisdom, that I now saw in my own reflection each morning. "Rachel?" she asked, standing as I approached. I nodded, and she gestured to the other women at the table. "This is Tina, Sophia, and Lauren. We're still waiting for Melissa." 4 women, not including me. Not 5 as Jennifer had said, which meant, "Sorry I'm late." A voice behind me, familiar somehow. I turned and froze. Walking toward us was the woman I'd seen David with that day in the car, his supposed sister. Except she wasn't his sister at all. She was another victim, another piece in a puzzle that was growing more complex by the hour. And as our eyes met, I saw she recognized me too. "You," she said softly. "The new one. The accountant." 5 pairs of eyes turned to me, each reflecting a different stage of the same painful journey I was on. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. "Ladies," I said, taking a seat at the table, "I think it's time we compare notes. Because what happened to each of us wasn't just a betrayal. It was a crime. And I intend to make sure they pay for it, in every way possible." 6 months later, I stood outside the federal courthouse, watching as agents escorted David and Vanessa in handcuffs toward separate police vehicles. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, money laundering. The kind of charges that come with years behind bars, not months. "Ms. Parker," a reporter approached. Microphone extended. "You were instrumental in building this case. How does it feel to see them finally facing justice?" I considered the question, thinking back to that coffee shop meeting that had changed everything. That day, as 6 women shared their stories, a pattern emerged that was far more sinister than any of us had initially understood. David wasn't just a cheater working with a predatory real estate agent. He was the architect of an elaborate scheme that had evolved over years. Each of us represented a different phase of his operation, I explained to the group. Melissa was his longest con, 18 months, ending with her losing nearly everything. Melissa nodded, her face tight with remembered pain. He convinced me to liquidate my retirement accounts for a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. By the time I realized what was happening, the money was gone, laundered through shell companies connected to various real estate developments. Then came Jennifer, I continued, where he refined his approach. Quicker timeline, smaller amounts, but more targets simultaneously. I wasn't the only one he was engaged to, Jennifer confirmed. He had 3 of us in different cities, all being slowly drained of savings. Tina, Sophia, and Lauren shared similar stories, each one a variation on the same theme. By the time David had reached me, his system was sophisticated. Vanessa wasn't his only accomplice. There was a network of people playing different roles. The sister who wasn't a sister, the friend Marcus who confirmed his lies, even the jeweler who provided falsified receipts. What made my case different was that I had the skills to uncover the fraud before it was complete. And now, I had something even more powerful. 5 other victims willing to testify. "I don't want money," Sophia had said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I want him stopped. I want him to never do this to anyone else." We'd all nodded in agreement. This wasn't about recovery anymore. It was about justice. With Martin's help, I compiled our evidence into a comprehensive case file and presented it to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. What followed was an intensive investigation that uncovered even more victims across 3 states. David and Vanessa had stolen over $1.2 million in total, ruining lives and futures with calculated precision. "It feels," I finally answered the reporter, "like the beginning of healing, for all of us." As the police cars pulled away, Jennifer joined me on the courthouse steps. "I never thought this day would come," she said quietly. "Neither did I admitted. Even with all the evidence, part of me was afraid they'd find a way out. Because they always had before," she nodded. But they never faced you before. We'd become friends through this ordeal. All 6 of us had. An unlikely sisterhood forged through shared trauma and the determination to reclaim our lives. The prosecutor thinks most of the money can be recovered, I told her. The offshore accounts weren't as well hidden as David thought. That's good news for the others, especially Melissa. And for you, I reminded her, your wedding fund, your inheritance. Jennifer shook her head. I'm not counting on getting anything back. I've already gained something more valuable. She squeezed my hand. Friends who understand, and the knowledge that I helped protect others from going through what we did. Later that evening, the 6 of us gathered at my apartment, now truly mine, since I'd bought out David's share of the lease. We opened a bottle of champagne, not to celebrate their downfall, but to toast our resilience. To the Phoenix Group, Melissa proposed, raising her glass. The name had stuck after I'd shared my folder title with them. Project Phoenix had evolved from an investigation into a support network for victims of romantic fraud, with the 6 of us as its founding members. To rising from the ashes, Lauren added. To finding strength in each other, said Tina. To justice, Sophia offered. To new beginnings, Jennifer smiled. I raised my glass last, to recognizing our worth and never settling for less again. As we clinked glasses, my phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Just heard. Congratulations. The firm is impressed. Partner track discussion when you're ready. Another piece of my life falling back into place. Not the same as before. Nothing would ever be the same, but perhaps better. Stronger. More authentic. Later, after everyone had gone and I was alone in my quiet apartment, I found myself standing before the mirror, studying the woman who looked back at me. She was different from the woman who had found that lipstick in David's car nearly a year ago. Her eyes held a new wisdom. Her posture spoke of hard-won confidence. The naive trust was gone, replaced by something more valuable. Discernment. All numbers, no passion, David had called me. Vanessa had echoed the sentiment, you're just a convenience to him, a stable foundation while he builds his real life. They had been wrong. So terribly wrong. My passion wasn't expressed in dramatic gestures or emotional outbursts. It was in my determination, my precision, my refusal to be victimized. It was in the meticulous way I'd built the case against them, the energy I'd poured into helping other victims, the care I took in rebuilding my life and helping the others rebuild theirs. The Phoenix Group was already working with 3 new women who had contacted us after the arrests made headlines. Our website had received thousands of visits. Our resource guide downloaded hundreds of times. What had begun as personal vengeance had transformed into a mission to protect others. Tomorrow, I would return to work with a new perspective and purpose. Martin had hinted at expanding our firm's services to include specific support for victims of financial fraud in relationships, a growing problem that few accounting firms addressed directly. I thought of the other women who had stood beside me today, each on her own journey of recovery. Jennifer was starting law school in the fall, inspired to help others navigate the legal system. Melissa had found a job teaching financial literacy to young adults. Sophia, Tina, and Lauren were rebuilding their lives one day at a time, supporting each other through the process. We had all been chosen because we seemed like easy targets. Responsible women with savings, trusting natures, and a desire for partnership. What David and Vanessa hadn't counted on was our resilience, our intelligence, our capacity to transform pain into purpose. I smiled at my reflection, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. All numbers, no passion. I whispered. The numbers don't lie, and neither does my passion for justice. My phone buzzed again, the Phoenix Group chat lighting up with a news alert. David and Vanessa had been denied bail. They would remain in custody until trial, deemed flight risks due to their history of false identities and hidden assets. I sent back a simple response. Phase 1 complete. Phoenix rises. Then I turned off my phone, made a cup of tea, and sat by the window, watching Seattle's lights shimmer against the night sky. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. Not because they were behind bars, though that helped. Not because the money might be recovered, though that mattered to many, but because I had discovered something invaluable through this ordeal, my own strength, the power of truth, and the knowledge that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can lead to the most profound transformations. The lipstick in his car had been the first domino, but I had determined where the last one would fall. And in the space between, I had become the woman I was meant to be all along.